In a network, you have two things that are mainly used to identify who and where you are on the network. You have a MAC address, and you have an Internet Protocol or IP address. No two MAC addresses will ever be the same. They are like a fingerprint for communication devices. Your IP address, however, can be changed by the server or by the user. All home routers today use DHCP, or Dynamic Host Control Protocol. When your OS boots up, it sees your router and asks for an IP address. The DHCP router will see your MAC address and assign it an IP. Now that you have an IP, you can send data to other machines by their IP address. Your IP address is just like your address to your home. It lets people know where you reside at. On a collision-based network, a transmitting computer broadcasts to all the computers on the network, and the only computer that will decode it is the one that has the proper IP and MAC address. This is a major flaw with collision-based networks. It's insecure and there's a lot of data loss. When two terminals transmit at once, the data will collide and will need to be resent. A switch is a bit smarter than a standard hub. A switch knows where the data needs to go and sends it to the appropriate switch. Unless that data needs to leave that specific switch, it doesn't. It won't matter how many hubs you link together. All the hubs will send the data to everyone on the network. A switch stays within its own hardware unless it needs to go outside to another hub or switch. Address Resolution Protocol, or ARP, is a helper protocol that assists in making the network a little bit easier, more efficient, and more reliable. ARP is based off a set of rules which can be bent and broken. It can allow you to intercept and manipulate data on a network. Kane's strongest point isn't its password decoders, but its ability to perform an ARP poison attack. This lets you to do an array of fun stuff. This attack is commonly called a man-in-the-middle attack. We will set up a computer to stand in the middle of the communications on a network for us to intercept. To install Kane, you need to install WinPCAP as well. Once Kane is installed, up and running, click Configure. Select the proper network adapter. If you want to play with some of the other options like filters and ports, you can, but we won't cover that today. Click the Start Stop Sniffer button. Then click the Sniffer tab. Click the blue plus icon to scan for the MAC addresses. Firewalls can be a bit bitchy to get past, so if you're getting little to no results on a scan, click the All Test box. It will take a little bit longer to get all the MAC addresses, but it's worth it. Once the process is done, click the ARP tab at the bottom. Click the top right field, and this will enable the blue plus icon again. This icon lets you add addresses to the list. On the left side, click the IP address of your router. On the right side, select the machine you want to stand in between and click OK. The machine you will be in between will be listed on the top. Now click the black and yellow buttons next to the sniffer, and this starts the ARP poison attack. The bottom window will display all the activity that's going on. At this point, Kane will intercept any plain text usernames and passwords. If a website requires SSL, the session will have an error. This is a good time to see if all your bank information, emails, and online services have secure logins. What makes this scary is the fact that you can do this through Wi-Fi. Someone can wirelessly latch onto your network and intercept all of your data and your confidential information. If you click the Passwords tab, you will see a list of all the plain text logons that you have captured. You can even intercept voice over IP conversations. While you're performing the ARP poison man-in-the-middle attack, you can run other IP sniffers like Wireshark to intercept data and analyze it. But we'll leave that for another segment.
I showed you how to re-enable CCD cameras to go and view infrared, and a couple of people asked for me to elaborate on infrared LEDs and LEDs in general, so I'm going to come up with a fun little project. But first we have to cover some basics, okay? Infrared LEDs, or LEDs in general, an LED is a light-emitting diode. If you don't know what an LED is, look at the front of your computer, look at damn near every piece of electronics on the market nowadays. They have LEDs. They're just little lights. LEDs are low power and low current, however they have a greater amount of power output, unlike standard light bulbs. They're also a form of diode, hence the name light-emitting diode, which means you can't plug them in backwards. Now, unlike a resistor or motor or other passive components, you can't put more voltage and more current across an LED to make it brighter. It has a maximum breakdown, and once you reach that, it's just going to fry, pop, sizzle, or just generally not like you anymore. Now, to prevent this from happening, what you have to do to the LEDs, you have to put something called a current limiting resistor, or just a resistor, so it doesn't draw too much current off that LED. Now, if you miscalculate this and you put a resistor that's too great of a value, it'll draw too much current across that LED. But don't fret. LEDs usually have a very broad range of current and voltage. Example, some of the LEDs I'll be using in my infrared segment, or the infrared rifle segment, can go anywhere from 1.2 to 2.2 volts. So that's a whole volt. That's a lot in electronics. And it can also be powered by 20 milliamps to about 80 milliamps. So that's really broad right there. You don't have to worry too much. LEDs are very forgiving technology. Now, to calculate the resistor that you need, you have to know this formula, or one of many. Knowing Ohm's law would help a lot, but I know people are lazy, and Google pretty much will teach you everything. So I'm not going to get too much into this. Check the show notes. I'll give you some Google search terms and maybe some links and crap, maybe some formulas in the end. Depends how lazy I am. Okay, your resistor that you have to calculate your resistor. You got to know the voltage source of the LED, the voltage of the LED, and then the current of the LED. And the formula is the voltage source minus the voltage of the LED divided by the current of the LED will equal to the resistance that you need to put across it. There you go. You can also string the LEDs in series, you can string them in parallel, learn Ohm's law, and you'll be able to go and shift your math around a little bit. Don't want to get too complicated. And this is LEDs. Pretty simple. The second part of this is transistors. Now, transistors are a really nice technology. That's all of our technology today is based off of transistors, CPUs, logic, all that fun stuff. A transistor is an electrical component which allows you to control the flow of a greater amount of voltage and current with a smaller amount of voltage and current, like a valve. So, example, you can use a 3-volt power source to turn on a circuit that needs or is using, say, a 40-volt source. Okay, do you understand what I'm saying? I hope so. Otherwise, check the show notes. Now, there's two kinds of transistors. You have PNP and NPN. And the difference between the two is how they work. I'll put it in the show notes. Don't want to overcomplicate you. You're probably confused as it is. But the main thing is the direction on which the electrons flow. Now, you have a base, an emitter, and a collector. Okay? Now, when you trigger that base has something called a saturation point. Once you meet or exceed that saturation point to its tolerable limits, it'll allow the flow of electricity from a secondary circuit from either the emitter to the collector or the collector to the emitter, depending on the type of transistor it is, whether it's NPN or PNP. Now, determining on the schematic symbol will determine what it is, NPN or PNP. But you're probably saying NPN, PNP, PNP, well, this is confusing. Give me an easy way of remembering all this crap. So, NPN, not pointing in. And if you look at the schematic symbol, it looks similar like a diode. So that shows you the direction of where the electrons will flow. PNP, or pointing in proudly, is the opposite direction. So just by looking at the schematic, you can understand that once the base is triggered, in which direction the electrons will flow. Now, let's get into some fun design. Now, this is just lecture, folks. I'm not going to go and show you all the soldering and whatnot. What I did was, knowing what I know about LEDs, I created a 30 LED array. So I have 3 LEDs in series, and they're all lined up in a 10 row, or column, 10 column parallel mobobber. This thing was a pain in the ass to build, even for me, because it's relatively close quarters, it's compact, shit can go horribly wrong really quick. If you really do want to make this infrared LED array, which can be used as an infrared floodlight in your infrared vision that we did in the previous episode, you can have a ghetto-tastic night vision, which I'll show you in a little bit. Now, if I power this thing up, I've designed all of these. It doesn't look all too impressive without the night vision on or in daylight, but you get the idea. What this is going to do is it's just going to fill an entire room up with infrared light. Using this thing with infrared vision, no joke, it's like clear daylight. It's pretty cool. You don't need to use 30 LEDs. You can use 3, you can use 2, you can use 10. Do the math, do the calculations, hit Google, type in LED calculator. They got, like, you know, Java applications that'll design the entire array for you in either schematic, ASCII, or like how to actually wire it up, like actual pictures of LEDs, resistors, and batteries. Now, what we know about transistors. A transistor can use a small amount of electricity to trigger a larger amount of electricity. So you can use a general purpose small switching transistor, like the 2N3904, or a slightly more powerful transistor, like the 2N3055, to take a infrared source, like an infrared remote control, and you get something called an infrared phototransistor. It looks just like a clear LED, but what it really is it's a transistor that its base is connected to a photosensor that detects infrared light. So the more infrared light that hits it, the more electrons it lets through. So, and I'm sorry, but that's something I forgot to mention about transistors. If you don't meet the saturation point, it'll only allow a small flow, not the full flow of electrons. I'm sorry, I forgot. Derf. Anyway, you have your infrared phototransistor, which is a detector of infrared light, hooked up to a battery pack, so you can actually trigger a secondary larger power transistor, which I'll put the schematic online, or maybe I'll do a schematic on the screen somewhere. And essentially, you can use your remote control to trigger a transistor, which then triggers an infrared array, which now, instead of having one rinky-dink 20 milliamp, no, I think it's 20 milliwatt, 20 milliamp, whatever, rinky-dink piece of shit infrared LED, can now trigger a massive array, essentially giving you greater range. And then a little bit later, I'll show you my infrared rifle, which is just using regular magnifying lens and some crap household junk. You can piece together a way of actually focusing this infrared beam for longer range. Let me explain how I designed my infrared rifle. The basic rifle is going to be nothing more than a lens and an LED. The lens you can get from any El Cheapo magnifying glass. I actually got a 2-pack of magnifying glasses for $1 at my local, El Cheapo shops. We call them dollar stores around here. Then what I did was I cut 2 rings out of 3-inch PVC pipe. That's what this is, 3-inch PVC. You can get the PVC pipe at any plumbing store. It's not horribly expensive. And what I did was, I know a little bit about PVC. What I did was, I cut a small chunk out of the edge of 2 pieces, and then I took them and I wrapped zip ties around it so it kind of clamped shut. I threw it in a pot of boiling water for a couple of seconds, and it essentially shrunk it. Then I glued one in here, and then the other one I left slightly bigger so it would just lock in. And that's pretty much it. Just, if you want to make it permanent, you can glue it in, but I like to use my parts over and over again. So we got a piece of 3-inch PVC pipe, a 3-inch to 2-inch reducer, and then a piece of 2-inch. Now what this does is it allows, I sanded the inside of this reducer down on the inside so this 2-inch can slide inside the 3-inch. There you go. Now, to keep the inside pipe over here right by the array from bouncing around too much, I got some foam, just packing foam. I think I got this from when I got my laptop in the mail. And I put it around the 2-inch piece of PVC, just a couple of segments. I cut them up, and then I just taped them on. That way it's some kind of soft, squishy support so the inside doesn't bounce around horribly. And then I pretty much just electrical taped the infrared LED array right to the pipe, ran the wire around, electrical taped the power supply for the infrared array, taped on the power supply for the driver circuit, and here's the driver. And for the detector, if I can get it, the detector over here, I just took a piece of El Cheapo, pen, cut a small tube out of it. That way when I have a remote control, like this is my camera remote right here, the LED is actually exposed itself. So what I can do is I can just match these up, just like that. That way there's no ambient infrared light coming from the sun or other third-party sources, like another remote, that'll do a false trigger on the rifle. I also take little chunks of this, foam stuff, and what I'll do is I'll actually tape it straight to the top, just a small chunk, so I can get the appropriate height that I need to match up with the remote control. Then I'll just tape the remote control to the top, drop the remote, and hopefully it didn't break. Use my thumb to operate the buttons, like so, and then use this arm to focus. That's pretty much an infrared rifle. If you don't want to go and use PVC pipe, and you're really cheap, or you just can't get any, you can go and get a plastic soda bottle, or a couple of them, and just regular packing tape, and make a couple of tubes the same way, just like this. It's really not too difficult. You can also use sheet metal. I mean, you can even use oak tag. I mean, you can use old cereal boxes. You don't have to use a 90mm lens, but, if you Google, focal point mathematics and all that crap, you can go and figure out what lens would be most appropriate for your project. I have 3/4 inch lenses that don't go as far, but do just as good of a job. So, there you go. I've got my infrared array powered up and focused towards the wall next to me, because if I put it directly in front of me or pointing towards the wall behind, the camera loses focus way too easily. So, I mean, here's, you can see the array on and going. The array is pretty powerful. I wasn't kidding when I said using this array with infrared vision, you could quite literally light an entire room up clear as day. Wasn't kidding whatsoever. So, what I'll do now is I'll go outside and I'll go downrange a little bit, using the infrared rifle and control the zoom to my camera, just to show you that with the infrared array and photo transistor and possibly an even more powerful transistor, you can control infrared devices from a greater range using a focused beam of infrared light.
G'day, I'm Big Bro. In this multi-part segment, I'm going to be talking about hacking your Linksys WRT router. Now, the Linksys WRT router is a standard home router. In these segments, I'm going to be using a WRT54GL. Some versions of the G by itself can also be used. Pretty much a standard home router that can be picked up from most computer shops. I bought mine from CPL in Australia. Pretty cheap and pretty common. So, the Linksys WRT router, most people know it as a standard home router, but not as many people know that the source code for it is released under the GPL. That pretty much means that people who are smarter than you or me can download the source code, modify it, or rebuild it from scratch, allowing it to do many more interesting things than it was originally intended to do. So in this first segment, I'm going to be showing you how you can flash OpenWRT onto the Linksys router, and how that'll help you as just a standard home router with some extra features. So first we'll download the firmware from the OpenWRT site, and once you've got that on your PC, we'll plug in the power for this, plug in the Ethernet cable into your PC, and let's get going. Okay, so once you've downloaded the firmware from the OpenWRT site, and in this case saved it onto our desktop, we'll open up the router administration panel. Now, defaultly that's at 192.168.1.1. The username and password by default is also admin and admin, so if you're having trouble with that, just try using those passwords. So once we're in the router, we'll go to administration, and then go over to firmware upgrade. Make sure for this that you are using Ethernet and not wireless, as this can cause a few hiccups. Now, obviously doing something like this can be a bit risky. You do have the chance of bricking your router, so if you're worried about the warranty or voiding anything or breaking it, don't do it. But if you're ballsy like me, we'll just go to the desktop, select the proper image and click upgrade. Now this will take a few minutes. We'll just wait for this to finish upgrading and then skip right along. Now what we'll do to lock the new firmware in place, there's a little hole on the back that says reset. All you have to do is get a pen or a pin or something similar, put it in there, hold it in there for about 10 seconds and it should reset everything. Now after resetting it and playing with the power, you can see that we've got OpenWRT up. This is the main web administration panel, and in a second I'll just show you some cool things that you can do with it. Okay, so now we've got it up and running, I'll show you a few handy things. OpenWRT by itself is a pretty standard, basic operating system, but when you expand from there, it allows you to download many packages, and in further segments we'll actually be customizing it to have like a portable mini Linux operating system. But for now it comes with the bare bones of an operating system. Looking through, you've got the top panel which lets you go to the different configuration menus. Can pretty much set the different things you need for the wireless, etc., things like that. But yeah, as I said, it is very bare bones. What we'll be looking at in detail in different segments is the installed software function. It shows you everything that comes with the router, and when you have an internet connection you can install more packages. Also, we now have good SSH access to it. We have full root access to it, and we can read, write and do whatever we want to it. So from now, in later segments I'll expand on cooler things you can do with it, other software we're going to install and where to go from there. Hope you enjoyed this segment and have fun. Try not to brick your router.
I want to talk about antenna design today because a lot of people think that, oh, you need to have a high power output transmitter to get far, which is not true. It also determines on your antenna and your coax type, and that's stuff that I want to cover today. Now, in the radio world, you have a radio wave, which is a sinusoidal wave, meaning it goes, from a positive to a negative point, okay, and that's measured by its frequency in hertz, which you might be familiar with if you're a computer person. Megahertz, gigahertz, kilohertz. A radio wave is measured in cycles per second, hertz. Hope I've got that clear to you by now. Now, you can't just take any piece of wire, just string it from point A to point B and say, oh, here's my antenna. Your antenna has to be specifically designed for your wavelength. Now, your wavelength is the distance between peak to peak on that sine wave itself, okay? Now, general rule of thumb is the higher your frequency, the smaller your wavelength is going to be, because if you have a certain amount of time and you add more frequency to that, your wavelength will shrink. So a higher frequency device like 2.4 gigahertz might only have an antenna, I think maybe 2.5 inches. I don't know all the calculations off the top of my head. But something like, say, 900 megahertz will maybe have like a 6 or an 8 inch antenna. Now you can actually design your antenna all the way down to like the kilohertz, or the just right down to like 4 decimal places, right down to the actual hertz. Now, there are different types of antennas. Okay, you have an omnidirectional and a unidirectional antenna, which are the two most common types of antenna. Now, an omnidirectional antenna is just like this light that's right above me. Okay, it is emanating an energy wave, in this case light, in 360 degrees all around me. Okay, a unidirectional antenna would be a lot like this flashlight. Now, this flashlight was designed to put a beam of light on a specific place. Now, let's say that this is a transmitter of energy, like a flashlight transmits light. Duh. let's say my tablet PC back there is a receiver. Okay, now if this is a radio transmitter and that's a radio receiver, we're going to go and transmit to that receiver. Okay, and we have a relatively focused beam of light, or focused beam of energy. This is a unidirectional antenna. A unidirectional antenna focuses that radio energy in one specific spot. Now, everything behind us does not have light. It does not have radio energy, light energy, whatever analogy. Now, it is actually sacrificing direction for focus. But with focus, you get greater distance. Now, the further we pull back, the harder it is to focus because the target becomes smaller. So what you could do is you can widen your beam. But if you notice, the wider it gets, the more it dissipates over range. So we don't have as much range as if it was focused. So you have to understand that a unidirectional antenna will actually focus direction. It'll sacrifice direction for focus, but gain range. Okay. Now, a common type of regular omnidirectional antenna is a whip antenna, like on most radios or cars. It'll pick up a signal from every single direction. Some directional antennas that almost everyone is familiar with is satellite dishes. Now, this is called a parabolic dish. Basically, this dish right here has been designed where no matter where the radio signal hits will reflect to a common point, which is right here. Okay? Now, this antenna that I actually have on here, that's called a dipole antenna. A dipole is a very, very general purpose antenna. Basically, it is either, it's two wires either strung horizontally or vertically, depending on whether or not you have a horizontal or vertical polarization of your signal. Now, it seems complicated, but it's simply put. This is horizontally polarized. This is vertically polarized. That's it. It's either whether or not the elements themselves are going from left to right or up to down. Now, your signal has to be modulated within the frequency. Now, we're all familiar with AM, FM because of our radios, but there's also other things like constant wave, carrier wave, some people call it, and short sideband. We'll get into those another day. So now you understand that your frequency is directly proportional to your antenna. This thing has actually been designed to the wavelength of the FRS radios I used in the previous segment. Now, you're saying, okay, that's great, fine, and dandy, so what does it take to build an antenna? Metal. That's it. Metal is an absolute conductor and reflector of electrical radio waves. So, like I said, this dish will actually focus all of the radio waves to this point. And this antenna, this dipole antenna, has been designed to receive the wavelength of my FRS radios. Okay? Now I've got something that any Wi-Fi enthusiast will understand is a Yagi antenna. Okay? Basically, each one of these elements will reflect of the radio signal of that desired wavelength back further and further until it hits the dipole, which is then fed into your receiver, which is something else we have to get into. Coax. How do you get your radio wave from your transmitter to your antenna? Okay, that's where coax comes in. Now, if you have satellite or cable television, you'll understand what coax is, but not all coax is created equal. The stuff that you see on the side of your neighbor's house that hopefully right now you're not thinking about ripping off his home to go and use in your own antenna designs, that stuff's not going to work because it's 75 ohms. Now, if you remember basic Ohm's law, ohms is the amount of resistance that something can have. A 75 ohm cable is too great for a transmitter. However, for receivers, it's just fine. So if you have a scanner and your neighbor's got a bit of extra coax on the side of his house he's not using, I didn't tell you to take it. Now, you normally want to have 50 ohm coax cable feeding your antenna. Not all coax is created equal. Some coax is designed for lower frequencies, some coax is designed for higher frequencies. Example, RG58, which is the stuff that's found in the really old cable-based networks. That stuff really sucks at high frequency, absolutely miserable for Wi-Fi. You shouldn't even run it more than 3 inches. But for lower frequency stuff like 50 megahertz, 60 megahertz, that stuff is good. RG8, which is usually commercial grade amateur radio stuff, is pretty good. It can go up to about 500-600 megahertz, but the longer the run it, the higher the frequency, the crappier it's going to get. LMR 100 is great for high frequency stuff, but it's so thin it shouldn't be run in long lengths. LMR 400, which is like a really thick coax cable, can go up to I think 6 gigahertz or even higher. I'm not sure. I have to go and look at my notes. But either way, the thicker your coax, the more power you can output. So don't expect to get some spaghetti strong piece of coax and pump 50 watts through it without that wire actually melting in your hand. So there's actually a lot to radio waves when it comes to personal safety. Now, right now I'm only showing you antenna design, but later on we're going to get into transmitting. Definitely going to get into 2.4 gigahertz and Wi-Fi stuff, and you have to understand that the higher your frequency, the higher potential you have for doing bodily harm. The higher your power output, the higher you can do bodily harm, the greater the intent. I mean, the greater the possibility. Intent. But anyway, this is just some basic antenna design. I'll put in the show notes some links that'll go into greater detail. I don't want to overcomplicate this. Just want you to understand the different types of antennas. That it does matter, either focused beam of energy, which is a unidirectional, or an omnidirectional, and your coax type. It's the only thing I want, and frequency and all that crap. So anyway, I'm rambling on again. Either way, hit the show notes. I'll put some links that'll explain in more detail exactly how radio works and how to design a dipole antenna. Maybe, you know what? Just go on the forums and ask me what you need to know, and we'll put up whatever links you're interested. So, yeah. Don't kill yourself, and if you do, at least record it so we can laugh at you.
As you can tell by looking behind me, I'm a big fan of dual monitor. I feel if you're going to multitask, you may as well have the room to work on. Over here, I have a GeForce 6200, I believe, and that's basically how it should look, One task is on one side, and the other task is on the other side of the desktop, your porn, whatever, however you want to have it. Over here is my wife's computer. She has a ATI Radeon card in her computer, and for some reason, whenever we have the dual monitor enabled, whenever you open any kind of task, it splits it like a web page or anything. It splits it between the two monitors instead of picking one or another. And it looks like shit. It's a pain in the ass. I mean, you can deal with it, but who wants to if you spend all that money on a good setup? So today I'm going to show you a program that's really good for helping you organize everything when you have two monitors. The program that we're using today is called Ultramon. Basically, once you install it, you just go down here to your taskbar, right-click on the Ultramon. You can go into display settings, set different displays or profiles. It's got mirroring. What I like is you can set a different screensaver for each desktop. So if you have two desktops, you don't want the same boring screensaver on each desktop, right? So let's see what else it's got. Wallpaper. You can set different wallpaper for each desktop. For example, this one I have the Earth, and over here, once it travels over there, I got a nice nature screensaver. You can also do things like set which monitor's primary. You can disable the secondary monitor because some games are real bitch about dual monitor. And one of the nice things I like that it adds on is up here on any of your windows, you can click this and it extends it across both monitors. Or if you click this over here, it'll switch it over to the other monitor. It's nice. I mean, it does the job, and it beats the shit that comes with the video card. Give it a try. See if you like it.
All right. Of course, Patrick Norton. I mean, he's got a lot of respect and reputation. He was on Tech TV. If you don't know who Patrick Norton is, turn this fucking show off now. Okay.
Just go to watch the video and then go to DL.tv later on. www.dl.tv. If you like it, great. If you don't, okay.
Okay, you know what? I want to ask you.
Okay.
What is a hacker?
A hacker?
You
mean a hacker in the sort of like, I make things better and explore and grow to know them, or a hacker in the sense of hackers are destroying the children of America today, media hype bullshit thing?
In your opinion,
we can curse on this? Is there anyone under 18? We're good? Okay.
You can say whatever you want. What do you think a hacker is?
What do I think a hacker is? A hacker is somebody who explores and try to literally own the guts of something, to grok thing. You completely just own the subject, whether it's DNS or race car engines. Some of the most amazing hackers I know are people that tweak shocks, for off-road racing, because they've just gone inside and owned that subject.
Okay. All right.
And hopefully take it to a new level.
Yeah. Okay.
A new level parts.
Well, Cracker. What is
Cracker?
It? Cracker.
The cracker is somebody who breaks into things.
That's pretty simply put.
Yeah.
That's what it is. All right. What is your opinion of the whole hacker scene today? How the media portrays it? Well, of course, you know both sides. I mean, you've been on both sides. I'm pretty sure who has it.
Everybody knows somebody or has seen something or a web page or.
All right. What do you? I mean, you're in the media. I mean,
Right.
you go on tech TV.
I'm a media professional.
I am not. How do you feel like about how the media presents hackers? What do you think that the media's opinion? I mean, like, local news.
I think it's okay. I think it's bad. Anytime somebody goes, a malicious virus will destroy your computers and all of your important files. We'll be right back. Well, that thing they do where they stretch it out, or they talk about, that when they tease you with something, it's like, oh my god, it's horrible, I have to keep watching. And then they go at the end, and it's like they tell you about this virus or this thing or phishing or whatever it is. Jack in the newsroom 7 action investigation team. Let's go to Jack, and Jack's back there. Martha, I've heard about something violent, terrible, and evil on the interweb. Hackers are attempting to steal your credit card codes by using something called phishing, right? And then he talks and he puts the fear, and it's like, watch out for emails. And it's like, if they sit there and they say, look, bad things can happen, or this bad virus is coming out, this is what you do to fix it, great. If it's one of those things where they're like, what's going to scare technically unsophisticated people into being afraid of computers and using the web because, hey, it makes the ratings go up and they're jerks and the building sticks.
Agreed.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But, we tried, for the first couple of years of Tech TV, we tried to kind of, reclaim hacker and, sort of use cracker instead of hacker. And it's just like, cracker, that's an insult to white people, because it's a
derogatory white man term.
That's the one. And you are a media professional. So and what we ended up, we kind of had to give up because every time we did that, we had to explain the context, and it just the momentum that the general public, in most cases, that thinks of hackers as being bad people who do naughty things, on the interweb or computer.
What is your opinion of moral ambiguity when it comes to dark hat, red hat, and white hat? I mean, me personally, I feel that hacking is the exploration of a system. Morals don't belong in that exploration because mommy and dad should teach you morals. That's where they have hacker and cracker. Right?
Did you ever hear of Neil Stephenson, Cryptonomicon, the books? He's a fiction writer, and the whole Baroque cycle. It was really cool because what he did was he brought to life the people that are responsible for modern science. The most interesting one in a lot of ways because he tries to play up people. Everybody hears about the laws of gravity and Newton, right? But nobody knows about Hooke. And the really beautiful line that Stephenson puts together, he says, "Look, Newton Newton's a mutant, right? Nobody's like Newton. Newton looks at the world and he sees things that nobody else has thought about before. Hooke looked at things that every one of us can see if we just pick them up and look at them, and he sort of figured out how the body works and the physiology. But he was ruthless. He was absolutely ruthless. This is a guy who, they basically, to figure out how the circulatory system is, they were doing things like, cutting open live dogs and keeping them alive while they basically figured out how the whole blood, lung, intestines kind of thing worked. It was incredibly cruel and heartless. It doesn't need to be done anymore, but at the time, it was the only way they were going to sort this stuff out, right? If you sit down there and if you say, it's a really interesting question, right? Somebody, I'm going to explore the telephone network system, right? Is that illegal? Ask a lawyer, right? You know what I mean? Is it unethical? It depends on your religion, right? You know what I mean? Or whatever defines your morality, or your sense of ethics. But the thing is if somebody doesn't go and look at something and try to figure out why it doesn't work or how it could work better, it never gets better, right? And anybody says, you can't look at our software because, well, we don't want anything to do. That whole the trade secret thing, because if you want to patent something, you've got to basically expose its innards to the universe. That's why a lot of things are trade secrets, like the Coca-Cola formula, rather than patented, because if it's patented, everybody can go out and know it, and they can go make it anywhere. The whole idea that, it's look, people do bad things. Your product should be as good as you can possibly make it. If you don't take, if the security company or a researcher or even a kid in review calls you up and says, hey, this is broken, you should fix it, and you don't, then you get your ass kicked on, by an internet virus or whatever it is. Well, that sucks, but you know what? It's amazing, right? Microsoft Windows, about a bazillion lines of code, right? The whole point of Vista is to try to, take a bazillion lines of code and try to make it have fewer holes. Is it going to change over time? I don't know. Gray hats versus white hats. I mean, look, the NSA actively recruits in every hacker convention in the world. And every, security companies, that's where they recruit. Kevin Poulsen, he was a nasty man, but now he writes for security folks. He's a good guy. He's trying to explain how this stuff works, and he's got amazing connections. And people tell him stuff that they would certainly never tell me or somebody at the Wall Street Journal. So, everybody's got a place in the world. If you're going out and you're like, society owes me a living, and I'm going to steal eBay account numbers, and I'm going to pay for my,
yeah, we know a couple of people like that.
Well, yeah, but it's it's sitting there. It's like, hey, dude, on one hand, it's a very creative hack of the human system taking advantage of eBay and people's gullibility. On the flip side, it's like, you're a jerk. You know what? And karma's going to kick your ass halfway across the planet.
You know what? And sometimes karma needs a helping hand.
Well, yeah. I don't endorse that publicly.
I do.
Yeah, well, I'm the one who said, there should be hunting season for spammers, but, that's a humorous thing. Please do not go out and hunt the spammer on my behalf.
I don't like spam.
No, I don't. Who knows what's on it? I don't know. Was that profound enough, or was that just too ostentatious?
It works.
I don't know. I mean, black hat, white hat, everybody I know who's a white hat has either done a little black hat thing or knows where that boundary is. The idea that, it's a trust game, right?
Yes. I mean, I personally feel that morals just shouldn't belong in hacking. Morals are a personal point of view. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter.
Yeah, well.
So, I mean, I have absolutely no idea, how spamming Viagra and horse porn people is
Don't you just love the horse porn? Why? Why does that show up? I just want to thank the folks at Google for eliminating horse porn.
No. Okay. For anyone that was at the last BSoD meetup, we damn well know that horse porn is not off of Google.
Well, at least it's not getting into my Gmail account. I have not accidentally clicked on a piece of
The one great thing I love about Gmail is when you go into the spam.
Don't be hiding your face, because you've seen it. You've seen everybody who has an email account and has had an unfortunate spam incident has eventually seen something involving animals and human anatomy. And hey, if the animal's consenting, God bless both involved parties. But if the animal's not consenting, it's just wrong.
Oh God, so many horrible things that have been done on the internet. Thank God for log files, huh?
Yeah. But and the other thing, if you're a teenager and you're on MySpace and you don't think your parents can find things you're talking about on MySpace, you're going to get your ass kicked.
You know what? Really, when I have kids and they can learn how to hide from me, let them. It's the whole. When they can teach me something. That's the one night you're not catching beat.
Yeah, well, until you find out that they've hacked into your bank account and bought a new guitar. Then that's going to be a moral dilemma for you.
Yeah, I had to pay their hospital bills when I break the guitar over their kneecap.
Because that's when you learn about actions and reactions, right? And being responsible for them. So.
Definitely.
Okay, so we covered white hats. What's a red hat?
Security specialists. People who are, white hat, I hack for good. I hack open source and all that great stuff. Black hat is I'm gonna go and
nefarious.
I'm gonna go and root VNCs and PayPal myself hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, build myself a girlfriend because you have no social skills to get one. Craigslist. Transvestite free.
I don't have a transvestite, but I did meet my wife through Craigslist. So.
Really? That is cool.
I met my wife on the interweb. So
I've never really. Nothing good's ever come from Craigslist. Oh God, the images.
Easy.
I'm trying. I'm trying.
Okay.
Security specialist. But you know what? How can you be a security specialist if you don't know how the criminals work? Like a lot of the stuff that's on the show, you can take it. Okay, great. I just learned how to protect myself, or I just learned how to steal something.
Well, and that's
information should be there be made available for you to do whatever you wish. I mean, granted, on the show we don't condone. I mean, there's nothing
it's
good.
Not going to tell people how to hack into paper.
No. I mean, there's nothing good has ever come into denial of service attacks, spam, harassment, juvenile crap that a lot of these hackers in, I hate to say the 2600 scene, but I hate the 2600 scene.
I'm not going to touch this one because there's a whole East Coast thing involving.
The reason I did not go to Hope is because we could not find a muzzle and shackles that could contain me. Because I would just cheer people. That's
deep cleansing breath. Okay, we're good.
My therapist said I was fine. But then again, he still thinks I'm taking my meds.
That's between you and everyone's watching. Bastard Sons of Dialup.
But I mean, there's just so much confusion of what a hacker is. A lot of people on
This
the streets,
confusion is not going away. I know this confusion is not going away because, I was reading the email letters. They did a Hack Everything article for PC, big cover story of PC Magazine, and it talked about everything from I wrote an article about hacking Priuses, about how people are basically putting EV buttons in them and batteries, and you can basically get 100 miles to the gallon for 10 miles. And somebody else wrote they wrote about ODB2 meters, so you can learn how to figure out what the check engine light, not get screwed by your local dealership. And people wrote about cool things to do with cameras and how to make you customize Word or whatever, all these different cool things. And somebody, this guy is an IT guy, wrote in and was like, I can't believe you're condoning hacking. You people are wrong, and I'm canceling my subscription, and you're all bastards, And
sons of Dialup.
Well, the guy never actually read the article, so he didn't understand they were talking about hacking in the sense of bringing more features and making things better and making life more cool. By taking the technology in your life and tweaking it and bringing it to the next level. He just assumed it was they were teaching people how to crack credit cards or something. It's it's a problem, right?
But, as a person that's kind of in the media, I mean, I'm definitely not as big as you. I'm probably never going to reach.
You're putting your face on a camera and it's on the web. Eventually, something's going to happen.
You know what? It's going to be there forever. Nothing on the internet ever gets deleted. I mean, what I'm trying to do is try to tell the world, show that hacking is not a crime. It doesn't have to be. I mean, granted, there are some laws that need to be bent or broken. I've got an Xbox. I modded my Xbox. Right. I don't care for stealing the games. Yeah. Xbox Media Center is the one reason I got
Xbox Media Center is awesome.
It's hell's yeah.
Greatest thing ever made. Only use Xbox though.
Yep. I mean, Xbox Media Center, Windows with Windows or Linux using networking shares. There you go. There's all your media. Why are you going to go to Digital Life and go, oh yeah, Intel's got this new streaming technology. Yeah, I've got it now.
Well, Vive is a marketing effort. That's a whole other.
Yeah. But, I mean, people don't realize that.
But that Core 2 Duo processor is nasty.
I still use a Pentium 2 450.
Mostly on a Pentium 4. AMD.
All right, okay, now that we just whipped our hardware out on the table and I just got shamed.
That's okay. How many people here have bought a new processor for the computer in the last 6 months? Raise your hand. Last year?
Well, yeah,
last year my computer blew up.
It's okay. See, they beat me, all four of those guys.
Oh, hey, whatever works for you.
I'm Irish. I don't flash my hardware. It's not to be done. It's not going to get me any points.
Oh, man. Chicks don't care about how much bandwidth you've got.
He's lying.
Anyway, Patrick.
To the packets, right?
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was an honor to meet you.
Pleasure.
You'll eventually be on the show. I'm probably going to save this for a later episode and do a whole schlep, but thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.